Viewing or listening to this podcast confirms acceptance of the disclaimer visible on your screen or found at authorscott.com/podcast. Welcome to the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast. I'm Dr. Scott Johnson, your guide on this journey to natural well-being. Here we explore evidence-based insights, revolutionary breakthroughs, and powerful health strategies that not only inform, but inspire change. Together, we'll uncover the mysteries of human existence and unlock the secrets to thriving. This podcast is more than just knowledge. It's your catalyst for unleashing extraordinary potential. Get ready. Your journey to boundless health and happiness starts now. Hello, friends. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Regaining Health and Humanity podcast, which will be the last episode for 2024. So I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. Chances are many of you are thinking about New Year's goals, and this may include getting more active. With new activity comes aches and discomfort. So that's why I've invited my friend and family physical therapist, Dave Hawkins, to the show. David Hawkins brings 24 years of experience in physical therapy and health and fitness to the Prime Meridian Healthcare team. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from Brigham Young University and then was awarded his Master of Science degree in physical therapy from Texas Women's University, one of the top physical therapy programs in the nation. He went on to become certified as a strength and conditioning specialist in 2005, later added certification in dry needling in 2013, and recently added level 3 performance nutrition coach to his resume. He began his career in Las Vegas and honed his skills for 5 years before opening a private practice in 2005. His success in creating results helped his practice expand to 3 clinics in Nevada and Arizona. He exited in 2019 when he returned back to his roots here in Utah. Over the past 24 years, David has helped thousands of clients with various issues overcome injury and return to their desired level of activity. His clientele has ranged from professional athletes to a 94-year-old woman and everyone in between. One of his favorite quotes is, "The first wealth is health," by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He believes that health is our number one asset, and that as each of us invest our efforts in health, other aspects of our lives will also improve. So welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. I mean, I listened to the introduction and went, is that me or is he talking about somebody else? But
Yeah, I feel the same way when I get introduced.
it's a kind introduction for sure. And no doubt that when we improve our physical health, it certainly has overlapping benefits in so many other aspects of our lives. And so I do believe that as people invest in that space, their time, their energy, and sometimes their dollars for sure, that those benefits are long-term and not just short-term. So thanks for having me on.
You bet. Well, nearly half of my audience, according to the metrics that I get, is between ages of about 40 and 55. So, middle age for most of those individuals. And so I want to start out by asking the question, can you explain why we don't seem to recover as quickly from physical activity as we age?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, part of what happens is for all of us, I call it, we have brushes with mortality where we start to think about these things a little bit more than maybe we would when we're younger. When we're younger, we think we're invincible, we can do all sorts of stuff, but as we get older, we start to think about it more and more. But the biggest things that happen is there's some change in hormones. We have reduces in blood flow, increased inflammation into the body, which can affect how our body recovers, right? If there's lots of inflammation, it's tough for our body to recover. So mitochondrial decline. So we talk about mitochondria as being the powerhouse of the cell. Well, if my mitochondria isn't operating to its optimal ability, then that affects not only just recovery, but other aspects of my life as well. And then finally, as people can attest to, as they get older, their joints feel a little bit different. A lot of it has to do with kind of collagen wear and tear that takes place in our joints and other places as well. And so the combination of those things can lead to the inability to maybe recover as quickly as I used to, and certainly make us feel our mortality more than sometimes we want to, for sure.
I'm glad you mentioned the mitochondria because years ago in my career, as I would be giving a presentation, I would say that no, health begins at the cellular level. But I think science has taken us now deeper into it begins at the subcellular level. And it really is about that cellular energy production that is through the mitochondria. And so it's so important that we emphasize those, that we use targeted supplements if we need to make those mitochondria work better, but just support overall cellular health. One of the
Agreed.
things that I'm interested in is red light therapy. And so, how does red light therapy work to reduce muscle soreness and promote recovery? And I'm also interested to know what specific wavelengths or protocols are most effective for older adults, since I know that some of the wavelengths are more superficial for the skin and others are intended to go into those deeper tissues.
It's a very popular modality right now, and I think it's gaining in popularity for sure with it becoming more accessible to people. I've even seen advertisements over the last little bit of portable devices that allow us to kind of have red light therapy readily available. For the longest time, it was something that people just couldn't get their hands on. It's too expensive or whatever
Mm-hmm.
else. But I think it's becoming more and more available to people, and a therapy that people are interested in because it's non-invasive, it's effective. Sometimes people are like, hey, I can't tolerate the cold, but I can do some warmth or red light stuff. And part of it, as you think about red light therapy, we talked about mitochondria earlier. So we can stimulate some mitochondrial stuff, increases some ATP production as well as cellular repair. It reduces some inflammation by modulating cytokines and
Uh-huh.
oxidative stress. So we're all experiencing oxidative stress as we go throughout life. And the ability to minimize that then helps us in that recovery process as well as just feeling better. And then, of course, enhances blood flow. And whenever we do that, whenever we actually improve blood flow to a space, we increase the amount of oxygen and other nutrients that are going to a space because of the increase in blood flow. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are some of the mechanisms that actually happen with red light therapy. In terms of wavelength, the biggest thing is as we change the wavelength itself, right, then it penetrates the different stuff. So anywhere from 630 to 680, it targets kind of superficial tissues. So think skin, think the muscle surface. As we get into higher wavelengths, 100 to about 850
Mm-hmm.
in wavelength, then we're going to penetrate deeper. And that's a little bit better wavelength if we're trying to go, hey, I've got more joint issues than I have superficial issues. And so some of those wavelengths actually make a difference. And as people think about doing red light therapy, one of the questions is, do I have the ability to target those things based on what I'm currently experiencing? You know, some red light therapies are better than others in terms of my ability to adjust wavelengths based on the benefit that I'm looking for. So it's a good
Just
question.
sticking with that kind of heat therapy range,
Mm-hmm.
can you explain the benefits of sauna use for muscle recovery and overall health, particularly in aging populations, and how often someone should use the sauna to maximize benefits?
I think the reasons that saunas are popular, and there's actually more research done on saunas than there is any of the cold therapies like plunges or whatever else. And the reason is because it's more comfortable, right? Like most people can tolerate heat better than they can actually tolerate cold. And so as you think about the research that's been done, and saunas have been used in some of the Scandinavian countries for, long periods of time. And a lot of research has been done on saunas in those particular parts of the world. And again, those benefits are the same thing. If we get if you've ever been in a hot tub before, you can get out and be like, oh man, my muscles feel like they're a little bit looser,
Mm-hmm.
because why? As we get into heat, it helps to vasodilate our vasculature. As we talked earlier about blood flow brings oxygen, brings nutrients that allows muscle recovery to take place quicker. Again, it reduces inflammation, actually helps to decrease some pro-inflammatory markers. So
Mm-hmm.
things that actually go, hey, let's kick up inflammation. And inflammation is important in your body, but we don't want a lot of it. We don't want too much of it. So it helps to kind of make sure that those pro-inflammatory markers are decreased a bit. It enhances cardiovascular health. As we're in hot stuff, our heart actually goes a little bit faster, right, in order to drive oxygen to those places. And then in terms of kind of last one, and one that people have experienced for sure if they've gotten into a hot tub or even in a sauna, is it just releases some stress, right? It allows our muscles to relax. We know that a lot of people carry tension. A lot of people are doing this. throughout their day as they're sitting at desks or whatever else. And so the ability to go, hey, let's allow those muscles to just relax and calm down are one of the benefits of sauna. Now, in terms of usage, an article out of JAMA, so the Journal of American Medical Association,
Huh?
they recommend 3 to 5 times per week and 15 to 20 minutes per session,
Okay.
depending on tolerance. So some people will do really well in heat and can actually spend more time, and other people go 10 or 15-minute mark, I'm ready to get out, And so I do think that you have to base it off of your own personal tolerance of what works best for my body, and always listen to those types of cues. But that's one of the recommendations that was given in the Journal of American Medical Association. So tend to
Great.
follow some of those things when they've done research on it and gone, okay, what are we seeing in terms of statistics?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you're right that the Scandinavian countries, many of them have them just built into their homes. And there are even some European countries that do the same, because that is just part of culture, and it's something that people participate in regularly. Shifting a little bit from heat to cold, you mentioned cold plunges, and they've been all the rave lately. A lot of people are doing them. What are the mechanisms behind cold plunges in reducing muscle soreness and inflammation? And again, how often should someone participate in one of these sessions for it to be effective?
Yeah, I mean, another great question. And like I said earlier, the challenge of cold plunges for most people is really a matter of, can I dampen the physical response and lean into the kind of stimulation that's there? Because you really have to go, hey, I'm going to block out my body's desire to get out of the cold water to really get the benefits of it. But on the opposite side of what we talked about with sauna, where sauna helps to vasodilate the vessels, when we get into cold, it actually vasoconstricts, right? And so if you have some inflammatory stuff going on, that vasoconstriction of the vasculature can actually help us to move some of that stuff out of the space. So when you think about when we're cold, think about it slows things down, including the ability of the nerves to actually send pain signals. So we calm some of that down. So we get a little bit of reduction in pain stimulus if we've got that actively going on in our bodies. And so for some people, that's actually where the true benefit is. They go, hey, I get into a cold plunge and it dampens some of that pain kind of signal that I'm getting. Same thing happens with the application of topical ice, right?
Right.
And then the other one is that it speeds up the recovery process by, think, lactic acid. So when I go hard at exercise, if I'm doing high intensity training or whatever else, the buildup of lactic acid in the muscles is what actually creates soreness. And so when I get into some cold plunge, again, that vasoconstriction can help make sure that we're moving some of those metabolites that we don't want, like lactic acid in the musculature, out of the system. And so it helps with the recovery process again, particularly in people that are my triathletes, my marathoners, even some weekend warriors, but mostly people that are going, hey, I'm hitting it pretty hard on a consistent basis. The ability to flush that out of the system, can be really, really beneficial for those people that are trying to keep going hard on a regular basis. In terms of how often, we'll go to a journal again, the Journal of Sports Medicine. So you think about that clientele. So guys that exercise on a consistent basis are participating in high level activity. They recommend 2 to 4 sessions per week, lasting from 2 to 5 minutes in anywhere from 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit water, right? So you look at that one and you go, okay, another one where we go, hey, 2 to 4 times a week, not quite as long as a sauna session because of tolerance, but we can get some pretty decent benefits pretty quickly if we can tolerate it. And to me, it becomes a little bit of a mental exercise as well, of going, can I, suppress my desire to get out and become a little bit more mentally strong while I'm being in really cold water.
That cold water can take your breath away. As someone who lives near the mountains and have done a lot of hiking throughout my life, I have actually swam in a glacier-fed lake. And when you jump in that, it takes your breath away. That is cold water.
Yeah.
You talked about tension, and modern society, it seems like we are more stationary, more sedentary people. And so we sit in the same position for long periods of time, and that can build up tension over time and even cause some misalignments, really. over a long time if you continue to just sit in that same position day after day after day and week after week and month after month. How does regular stretching and even mobility training contribute to reducing muscle soreness and maintaining muscle function as we age?
That's a great question. It's one that I'm talking to people about all the time. Not everybody's doing cold plunge or sauna or whatever else, but everybody that comes in to see me, we are talking about stretching on a consistent basis, simply because I've said time and time again that flexibility is the fountain of youth, right? When we can keep our movements, we typically actually feel young. The question I get pretty frequently, though, is what's the difference between flexibility and mobility? It's like, are those the same thing? Are they one and the same? They sound synonymous, but are they different? And I define it as flexibility is the ability of a single muscle to go through its available range of motion. So it's available stretch. Whereas mobility is typically complex movement. Think of a squat or a lunge or things that we get joints and muscles involved together that then allow me to move.
Yeah,
The
that makes
challenge of the
sense.
modern day society is we get in postures that aren't very good for our bodies a lot, right? So if I turn sideways and I go, what happens if I'm at my computer doing this? I get the shortening of the muscles in the front of me, and then I get a weakening of the muscles in the back. If we
Hmm.
go down lower into our hips, when we sit, we're in a shortened position for our hip flexors. We're also in a shortened position for our hamstrings. When our knees are bent, our hamstrings are shortened.
Hmm.
Both of those muscle groups, the hip flexors and the hamstrings, affect what my pelvis is doing in terms of, is it being pulled forward or is it being tucked backwards underneath me? And so stretching and addressing those things on a consistent basis can be super beneficial. Number one, in terms of avoiding injury, right? If my mobility and flexibility patterns aren't very good, typically our activities will get us outside of our availability in terms of flexibility and mobility. And then I get in trouble. It's where sprains and strains happen. And as we get older, we don't want to give away our activities. We typically
Hmm.
don't. We go, I don't care if I'm not as flexible anymore. I'm still out playing golf, or I'm still running, or I'm still, hiking. I'm still doing whatever else, and not paying attention to, hey, I'm right at the edge of my available flexibility mobility, which is where sprains and strains take place. And so all of those things that we talked about are the reasons why people should be committed to doing some mobility work on a consistent basis. My challenge to each of my patients is to spend 5 to 10 minutes a day on personal flexibility,
Hmm.
like working on neck motion, working on postural stuff, working on major muscle groups. So when I talk about major muscle groups, I'm thinking about hamstrings, hip flexors, the ability of your thoracic spine to rotate,
Hmm.
right? Which is one that's often overlooked by people. They're like, I don't know why my shoulders are bothering me. It's like, well, because you've lost the ability for your thoracic spine to do what it's supposed to do because we've been hunched over. And now we're
Yeah.
spilling into that shoulder joint all the time. And then a calf stretch is another big one. I love to employ foam rollers where we're laying over the top of a long cylindrical foam roller,
Hmm.
right? And I'm just opening up that posture, trying to go the opposite way versus being back in that hunch position, right?
Yeah.
As you talk about benefits, we increase circulation to muscles and joints. We improve flexibility, and in doing so, we reduce stiffness, and that leads to greater gains in our ability to participate in life. It aids in maintaining range of motion in those joints, which is crucial as we get older for sure. A conversation I had today with a patient of mine, we were talking about the ability to squat.
Hmm.
Okay. When we're younger, when we're kids, you look at little kids and they're down on the floor in that squat position, playing with all sorts of stuff, whatever else. As we get older, we lose that ability to squat. And as we get a lot older and that ability to squat even decreases more, our ability to participate in life takes a significant hit. Because think
Yeah.
about everything you need to do when you squat. I get in and out of a car. I get in and out of bed. I go to the
Hmm.
bathroom. I go up and down stairs. It just affects so many things. And so a consistent kind of work into personal flexibility is one of the things I'm challenging patients to do all the time.
Leads me right into my next question. I think you maybe talked about some of these already, but are there specific stretches or mobility training that you recommend or encourage most adults to be doing regularly?
Yeah, so I break it into two different categories. One is a dynamic stretching routine, which I always tell people you want to be doing before activity. So if I'm going to go play pickleball, like what are the things that I should warm up? I should warm up my shoulders. I should certainly warm up my hips. And we can do that by simple things like jogging in place, doing some air squats, doing some jumping jacks, leg swings, shoulder circles. All of those things can be helpful in terms of prepping the body for activity. People sometimes say, well, what one should I do? And I'm like, well, think about the activities that you're going to ask your body to do if I go participate in X, Y, or Z. I'll take pickleball again because I have a lot of patients that play pickleball.
Mm-hmm.
The side lunge, like lunging side to side a little bit, like, doing side to side stepping or doing air squats or doing shoulder stuff. Think about what do I need to do to get my body warm? Dynamic flexibility, right? Or
Uh-huh.
dynamic warm up. Afterwards, as I go, hey, my body is now warm. Now I can get into some of the more traditional static stretching where we're holding things for longer periods of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I give people advice on how long should I hold, I tell them 30 seconds is the minimum you should hold, all the way up to 2 minutes based on time, available time, and then also tolerance. So one of the things I've been participating in recently is a little bit of a mobility challenge. And the challenge is spending 30 minutes at the bottom of a squat position on a daily basis. Now that's not 30 minutes all at once.
Yeah.
That's 30 minutes throughout the day. And initially I had to kind of bolster my ankles up a little bit so I could get down that squat position because of some limitation in ankles. But it's been really helpful. I've been doing it for about a week is all. And I'm like, okay, I'm moving a little bit better into my hips, knees, and ankles for sure. The other one was to hang from a pull-up bar. And the goal there was kind of a 5-minute challenge. Again, not all at once, but the ability to do that to capture full mobility in the shoulders. Now, do I recommend that for everybody? No, I don't. Because if you can't hang at the bottom of a pull-up position without pain, you shouldn't be doing it anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should modify that to go, hey, I'm going to do a kneeling stretch with my arms out in front of me or something else to try to gain that mobility in the shoulders. So does that answer your question?
It
I
does,
mean,
yeah.
there's some major muscle groups for sure, but where I see most people struggle is just with consistency. It's like you got to be doing consistent work, or it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's about prioritizing that time and making time for our own health. All too often, we tend to prioritize other things that are not so beneficial. Like we're going to get through that Netflix series over the weekend, or we're going to prioritize whatever game we're playing on our phone or whatever, or the social media scrolling, when we should shift some of that time into things that are actually benefiting us and helping our health improve.
I told my son just on that comment, Scott, I was
Uh-huh.
like, I don't care if you do those things, right? Because we all are going to do those things. But let's habit stack that a little bit and go, while I'm scrolling on my phone, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be at the bottom of the squat, or I'm going to be in a hamstring stretch, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be in a calf stretch, or whatever else, where I'm still doing some of those things that we all do. But now I'm just going to combine that with some stretches to make sure that I'm getting benefit in a time that maybe I wouldn't get benefit otherwise. We're just going to habit stack it for sure.
I might be dating myself, but back to the time when you had to watch commercials because you were watching live TV, I used to do things like push-ups or sit-ups or whatever during those commercials just to keep myself active and give myself time to get up and not be sedentary for so long.
Yeah.
You can find ways to make it incorporated into your daily routine if you prioritize it.
hmm
I've experienced dry needling from you, and I believe it was an important part of my recovery from golfer's elbow. Will you
hmm
share why you incorporate dry needling into your practice and how it works to support recovery after injury?
Yeah, a couple things about dry needling, why it's effective. We can target trigger points, right? So muscles that have done this, we can help to
Mm-hmm.
try to release those things. It increases local blood flow to accelerate healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk about that here in a second, where you can go, do I understand that? It stimulates a neurological reset. So pain is a subjective thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I call a 5-level pain, you may go, Dave, that's a 2, or somebody else might go, hey, that's a 7, right? That it's
Mm-hmm.
a subjective thing, and so sometimes it helps with some neurological reset of that mechanism, and then finally it activates the body's own endogenous opioids, right? Where we get a
Mm-hmm.
release of opioids into the system, which help with some pain decrease for sure. But the easiest way to explain it to people is something that they've all experienced, which is a paper cut. So if I cut my finger with paper or even a knife, my body goes through a natural cascade of events to stop the bleeding, scab over top, create new skin underneath, scab falls off, my finger's all better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't want to cut you to create that experience. So instead, we stick needles into a space to try to get your body's own healing mechanisms to actually focus on a spot, right?
Okay.
It's one of the easiest ways that I try to explain it without getting into the kind of the deeper stuff, which sometimes can be hard to understand. But that's what we're trying to do is stimulate your own body to try to heal itself a little bit faster, a little bit quicker.
Mm-hmm. It's important that people personalize recovery routines based on their individual needs and limitations and health conditions they're experiencing. Can you share examples of how one might adapt these therapies for someone with maybe a specific health issue or mobility limitations?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I challenge my patients all the time to look for cause and effect relationships. I do this, this happens. And you want to look at those things, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And so, for example, one of the things that I'll consistently have from people that have arthritis, when you ask them to put ice on their knee, they go, that doesn't feel very good to me. And so, people with arthritic conditions will typically benefit more from some of the warmth type stuff, the saunas, the moist heat, the red light therapy, those types of things they will benefit from much more than they probably would even ice. Now, is ice a great, kind of pain controller? It can be for sure. But in somebody who has arthritis, they go, ooh, that cold really affects me. And so having them leaning into some of the kind of heat therapies is actually probably more beneficial for them. Same thing with people that are going have a lot of mobility issues. If their mobility issues because of pain, then the cold therapies can help with some pain modulation. But if they're going, man, it's not really a pain issue, it's just a tightness issue, like I just feel super tight, then those individuals are actually going to be ones that would actually benefit more from heat because I'm warming up the muscle. So then as I go and stretch, I can have the benefit of having those muscles warm versus those muscles being cold, right? So, and then the other one that I typically tell people who are considering saunas and cold plunges or whatever else, if you have some cardiovascular issues that you've been diagnosed with, probably good to check with your physician, number one, right? And then also making sure that the shock of the heat or the shock of extreme cold doesn't create too much of a heart stress for people that
Right.
have some underlying cardiovascular issues. Again, both of those are on the extremes of going, hey, super cold or super hot. Sometimes that can be tough for that particular population. But I don't know if that helps and that answers the question for you, but definitely the bottom line for anybody is going, hey, listen to your body. See what your body tells you. As you do different things, your body does a pretty good job of going, that's not a good idea, or going, yeah, lean into that. And leaning into that cause and effect relationship of going, I did this, I felt better. Great. Do that some more. Rinse and repeat. I did
Mm-hmm.
this, I didn't feel good. Time to look at a different modality.
Speaking of modalities, we've talked about a lot of different modalities and things that you can use. Are there benefits to combining several of these therapies together?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some proven benefits for sure of combining hot and cold because of the vasodilation and the vasoconstriction that happens. And so think about the pumping action of the vessels to try to move, lactic acid or other things out of the space, or helping with, hey, pumping, inflammation out of an area, right? So as you think about combining those things, and again, if there's cardiovascular issues, I wouldn't recommend it. For those athletes that are like, hey, I'm really trying to lean into some recovery, combining sauna with cold therapy. I don't know if people have ever done this before where they're like, hey, in the winter, I love to go out and get in the hot tub and then I go jump in the snow. I've certainly done that many times as a kid. That feeling of going, man, that feels pretty crazy actually. But that combination of going cold and then hot can certainly have some benefit for sure. Red light therapies, heat therapies with stretching. I have a patient currently that he does his stretch routine in a sauna, right? He goes in and sits in his sauna, and then as he starts to warm up, he goes, okay, I can feel my body temperature rising. I'm going to work on my stretch. while I'm here in the sauna. So any type of heat therapies when trying to improve stretching can be definitely beneficial. And then
Hmm.
physical therapy, so directed kind of activity with any of those modalities. So when people come in to see me, we're using foam rollers, we're using massage tools, we're using dry needling, we're using cupping, sometimes we're using taping, and then combining that with exercise and movement to try to enforce, what we're trying to accomplish out of those modalities as well, right?
Hmm.
And so having some direction, because sometimes that's the biggest challenge for people, is they get to a space where they go, I don't want to be worse, and so I don't know what to do, and so because that I don't do, and so having some direction around that of, hey, you should be doing these activities with these modalities can be very, very beneficial for people for sure.
You mentioned earlier about talking to your physician if you have a cardiovascular issue before doing some of these things. Are there other safety considerations that people should take into account before they incorporate red light therapy or cold plunges, sauna, stretching, any of these other things?
Yeah, I mean, with red light therapy, the biggest thing you worry about is skin irritation. So kind of monitoring the skin of how did my skin do after a red light therapy session. If we're developing skin breakdown, that can be a big time challenge for sure, and one of the contraindications to doing red light therapy. And with sauna, we're monitoring kind of being overheated and dehydrated. So when you think about when you're in a sauna, what happens? You just sweat profusely, right? I mean, if
Hmm.
you've ever been in a sauna before, it's just like, man. And some people love that feeling of going, I'm opening my pores and I'm cleansing everything out and I'm
Hmm.
just dripping in sweat or whatever else. But that can also lead to some dehydration. So making sure that I'm staying well hydrated, both going into the sauna session and then coming out of the sauna session for sure. So that's one of the big ones for sauna. And then cold plunges is just too long, right? So we talked about 2 to 5 minutes earlier of being in a cold plunge. What happens if I stay in a cold plunge for 15 minutes?
Mm.
Does that make me tougher? Not necessarily. Sometimes too much of a good thing is actually bad. And so being overexposed in a cold plunge can lead to some hypothermia and can lead to some damaged tissue. And so making sure that we don't overdo it in any of those kind of extremes as well. Or not overdoing it in the sauna either. Like we don't want to go, hey, I'm going to go spend 60 minutes in a sauna because then we worry about overheating as well as the dehydration stuff we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
Just avoiding extremes is the biggest thing. Trying to keep to going, okay, the benefit happens here, with cold plunge in between 2 to 5 minutes. So do I need to go 10? No, I don't. And for some people, that's the reason why they like it. They're like, hey, I can get in and get it done and be quick with it versus going a 15 to 20 minute sauna session.
Hmm.
Right. So those are things that I mention to people when they're talking about these modalities and wondering, hey, what should I lean into? What should I not do based on their own situations?
Great
Does that answer your
advice.
question, Scott?
It does. Earlier, you also talked about kind of consistency and the importance of being consistent in all of these things that you're doing. It's not really a one and done, or you feel better and then stop doing it. You still want to incorporate some of these things for maintenance. Can you discuss the long term benefits of consistently using these recovery methods and how they might impact overall quality of life and maybe even health span?
Sure. There's a lot of kind of conversation about longevity right now. It's a hot button for a lot of people, and particularly as I mentioned earlier, as we start to have brushes with mortality, whether it's our own, where we're going, hey, my body isn't feeling as good as I want it to, or we're seeing the decline in our parents or a loved one or whatever else. I think then we start to really think about it. And so being consistent, we talk about habits a lot. Like, what are the habits that you're leaning into? One of the quotes that I share with patients is that you need to chase the habits of health because they're not going to chase you. It just doesn't happen the other way. And so, what are the habits that you're building into your daily routine that is going to make you better? Because it's not one good night's sleep. It isn't one workout. It isn't one cold plunge. It isn't one good meal. It isn't one therapy session. It's doing those things on a consistent basis. The other quote that I tell people all the time is consistency over time is really what creates change. And
Hmm.
that's a life principle. That doesn't matter if you're playing the piano, you're learning a language, you're doing a podcast, it doesn't matter. It's like being consistent with those things is what really creates the biggest cumulative change. And then as we lean into multiples, We go, as I lean into my nutrition, as I lean into hydration, and as I lean into sleep, and as I lean into mobility, as I lean into, cardiovascular fitness, the cumulative effect of all those things then creates health span, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in my practice, we talk about kind of four different quadrants: mobility, flexibility, strength and stability, balance and coordination, and then cardiovascular fitness. And I
Mm-hmm.
see people all the time that will lean into one specific area and it leaves them deficient in other areas, which is what creates the injury. And so trying to be balanced in those spaces and making sure that I'm not avoiding or neglecting any one area, but doing them enough, to actually have success. Lifespan, we've done a great job in the medical community of extending people's lives, where we're
Mm-hmm.
adding more years to people's lives. It doesn't mean we're improving their quality of life.
Right.
That's really up to us, right? Health span is up to us. And what happens is when things break down, it has an effect on all the downstream stuff. So when pain is present, then what happens? People stop doing things. When I stop doing things, it leads to a decrease in mobility, a decrease in strength, and that decrease in strength means I don't support my skeletal structure as well, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
right back into that more pain, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. And so that's why the consistency of those things helps me break the cycle and wind myself back out so I can go, hey, I used to be having had a tough time with a lot of my favorite activities. And now because I've leaned into some of these things, I can really start enjoying the stuff that I love to do the most. And that's what then over time creates the improvement in health span. Because as I do those things, we talked about the effect on the cellular level of the mitochondria. Now all of a sudden my mitochondria are functioning properly. I've got more energy to do the things I want to do. And the limitations that would keep me from doing that aren't there because I have good flexibility, I have good strength, I have good balance coordination, and I have good cardiovascular fitness. And so at the end of the day, I think that is the part of the take home message is going, what are you consistently doing that is moving your health forward versus backwards?
For sure. It's all about the things that we unite together. It's the nutrition, it's the sleep, it's the managing stress, it's the
Mm-hmm.
being active, and all of these things that we've talked about that are going to help us not just live longer, but live healthier for longer, because that's really what health span is about, is reducing the amount of limitations and improving our health for as long as we can into those latter years. I find it funny when people will say, well, all of these things are great, but I'd rather just live my life and enjoy everything and then die young. And my response usually is, well, you probably aren't going to die young. You're going to still live long, but you're not going to enjoy those last 10 years of your life because you're going to have a lot of limitations and you're going to wish you would have done
That's
these things
true.
earlier. Well, thanks, Dave. I think that this has been a lot of good information. For me, it's confirmed some of the things I'm already doing, and it's also been a good reminder that there are some things I could improve upon or do a little bit better or more of so that I can have that health span we just talked about. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to share these important tips with the audience.
Yeah, great to be with you, Scott. It's always a pleasure. I learn a lot from you when I'm with you for sure. And I hope that your audience appreciates the work that you're doing to try to get them good information. So thanks so much.
Thank you for sharing your time with us today. I hope you've gained insights to elevate your health and life. For more transformative evidence-based wisdom, I invite you to explore my 20-plus books at authorscott.com/shop. Don't miss out on the chance to supercharge your health and guide others to a better life. Like, share, and subscribe to join the movement transforming lives. Here's to your journey toward boundless health and happiness.